I will answer them. Now I'll move on to the second question. The second question, I'll read it from the screen, is Zoraki Göçmen, the forced refugee in English. How do you compare the commitment of Hizmet participants in 80s, 90s and after 2000? On the other hand, the ones that in the West and in the East right now. Why did I ask this question? He asks himself. I have moved from Central Asia to USA and realized that the attitude towards the forced migrants is quite different. Even though the democracy and human rights are very bad in ex-Soviet countries, like Central Asian countries, the people and the attitudes are quite warm, like Hizmet participants as well. But in the West, democracy works, but the attitudes are getting cooler. Then I ask a few questions what you mean by attitudes from the local Hizmet settled people in the West years ago and the participants towards the newly migrated ones. So this is a very hard question, and important ones. First of all, there are good examples. We can't say everything is bad, you know, like all. There are very good examples, you know, like we hear them as well. The fact that some people have a bad experience shouldn't clear them all out. And there are bad examples, and there are sometimes terrible examples as well. Unfortunately, the person who asked the question might have some of those bad treatment, let's say. Well, it's a big question, East and West, old and new. There is generational difference. There is from idealism to organizational level. You know, like you may compare when things are more romantic and emotional to where things are more structured and organized, in a way that people think that, oh, there might be someone who is responsible to do this, so I don't have to take responsibility, which might be today's understanding in the West mainly, to the times where everyone used to take responsibility because there wasn't anyone who is taking responsibility. So I think there are some reasons why forced immigrants are having really difficult time. First of all, their expectations might be high, you know, like high as, you know, when you go to any country, you look after each other. It was the main common practice, but the main structural challenges, the financial troubles and this and that have affect those capacities a lot. The human resources are so diminished, so it's not as good as it could have been if things are slightly better. The second thing is, I think people, you know, like who are settled in the West may not really understand what's going on in Turkey. So after all, it's a distant issue, and the whole information comes through social media or sohbet circles or in different mediums. So it is not as good as the reality itself. I think we might fail to understand what sort of traumas people might have suffered, because no one has experienced until now. No one experienced crossing through rivers and muddy areas and walking miles and miles to get to somewhere safe in a safe country, being harassed by the police or being persecuted in a different way, losing everything. These are lifetime experiences, and it's very hard for anyone to understand these issues unless you talk about them. So I'll come back to, please write all about these experiences in your blogs. It's very important to share your perspective. Unless you share it, no one will know about it. The second thing is the number of immigrants are very high, that more than the settled communities in most of the cases. And the host communities are not really settled. They were very much dependent on Turkey and Turkish support. So once the source of support, the Turkish people, become the source of, let's say, burden, things are changed very quickly. Like, you know, the place where you used to look for some help, financial aid, organizational aid, human resources aid to Turkey, become the main place where you have to now support and aid, at the same time look after people who came from there. So you know, like it makes everything stretch too much. Third reason, I think Hizmet people in the West are not effectively using the state and civil society channels enough, which means like when someone comes into the country, you don't have to look after all aspects of the person. you should be able to combine that person and his needs to the local service providers and help providers and information providers. And if you make them able to deal their issues themselves as quick as possible, then you will turn that liability into an asset. But unfortunately, we have this romantic idea about like trying to look after everyone. Then it tires out everyone, and they can't really handle it. It creates a lot of frustration that people don't want to even mention. But in some cases, for instance, in Germany, in different parts of the world where people integrated themselves, has a lot of find it a lot a lot easier than people who are trying to integrate via Hizmet people or other Turks, because those Turks themselves have not very well integrated. They don't know what the state can offer, what the civil societies can offer, what the society, how to help and rehabilitate the traumas that an immigrant might have had in his time. So these are the issues. I think it's not viable in long term, because no one is thinking that this might go on further and it can get worse in coming years. Like the numbers can increase. As we know, not only Hizmet people, different secular communities are trying to get away from Turkey as well. So it will create a lot of, it will stretch all the stresses even further. I would advise people who are migrated to try to settle themselves, find, like the local channels and directly engage themselves, however other peoples are doing, and keep Hizmet channels as secondary option. It will avoid a lot of disappointment, and it would help you to move in better, let's say. I do understand, I don't want to sound very mean at this level, but I'll talk a little about what can be done in this matter in one of the coming questions. But these are the thing. I think people are having an empathy problem. They don't really understand what Turkish immigrants has gone through. Two, the numbers of immigrants have already outnumbered in most places the numbers of settled Turkish community. Three, the Turkish communities are weak and unorganized. Four, the Turkish community is not creating a good, viable channel between the immigrants and the host country, not themselves. They're not, making good bridges to make them use anything available for the immigration, any support that is available for the immigrants. And the forced immigrants might rely on too much on Hizmet, assuming that they would help them. But actually, if they were to go out, they might find a lot of caring people listening them and helping them. And I think in long term, it is not viable. Thank you very much. I can see the questions on YouTube chat box, and I will definitely come back to them. And please, do keep sharing and liking the video, and we might have more people coming in. I know the numbers are not important. Many people comes in and watches these videos afterwards. So let's move on to the next question.